She had not been invited to be celebrated. She had been invited to be destroyed. The white gold envelope had arrived on a Tuesday, sleek, deliberate, cruel, and Kadisa had stared at it long enough to feel the old wound tear open again. Kang Min-ho is getting married. The man who had called her body an embarrassment. The man who had returned her ring via courier. The man who had looked at her in front of his family and said, "You are too much." And now he wanted her in the front row of his humiliation spectacle, one final, public confirmation that he had upgraded. What he did not know was that she had also upgraded. She arrived at the Maison Blanc Grand Hotel with her hand resting lightly on the arm of Han Seung-jun, founder of the Seung Group, CEO of 3 international conglomerates, and the man that Kang Min-ho's entire family owed $3 billion to. The room went silent the second he walked in. And something inside Han Seung-jun, something ancient, impossible, and terrifying, went very, very still the moment he looked at her. Welcome to Afro-Korean romance, where love has no borders. If you believe in love, please like, share, and subscribe for more Afro-Korean romance stories. The envelope smelled like expensive paper and old spite. Kadisa set it on her kitchen counter and made herself a cup of tea before she opened it. She needed the warmth. She needed both hands steady. She needed to not cry, not this time, not over him. Kang Min-ho and Park So-yeon, request the honor of your presence. She almost laughed, almost. It had been 2 years since Min-ho had ended their 3-year engagement the week after his mother looked at a photo of Kadisa and said, "She is not what we envisioned for the family." 2 years since he had looked Kadisa in the eye and told her she needed to lose weight before she was worthy of being shown off. 2 years since she had handed back the ring herself. She would not be sent, and walked out of his apartment with her spine straight and her heart in pieces. She had rebuilt, slowly, painfully, gloriously. She ran her own events company now. She had clients on 3 continents. She had a wardrobe that celebrated every inch of her, curves and all. She had learned, bitterly and beautifully, that she was not too much. She was, in fact, exactly enough. But the invitation sat there like a splinter under the skin. He wants me to watch him marry someone else. He wants me to sit in that room and feel small. Her best friend Amara called it within 60 seconds of seeing the envelope photo Kadisa had texted her. He wants a reaction, Amara said. He wants you to either not come, which proves he still got to you, or come and fall apart in public, which is worse. I know. So don't go. Kadisa picked up the invitation again, turned it over. The hotel was Maison Blanc, the most prestigious venue in the city. It would be crawling with society people, cameras, money. Min-ho came from a political family. His wedding would be an event. I'm going, Kadisa said. Amara went quiet for a beat. Then you're not going alone. The call Amara made on Kadisa's behalf was not to a friend or a date. It was to an office on the 42nd floor of the Seung Tower, the kind of office where the air itself felt expensive, where assistants walked in whispers, and where the man behind the glass desk had not attended a social event as anyone's guest in 4 years. Han Seung-jun, 34, Korean, founder of the Seung Group, which had quiet fingers in shipping, technology, private security, and, if the rumors were correct, a shadow network that old families in Seoul, Lagos, and Johannesburg whispered about after midnight. He was not a criminal. He was something more dangerous, a man who made problems disappear through influence. He was also, as it happened, the primary creditor of the Kang family's collapsing political empire. Amara knew this because Amara's uncle worked in finance and had a loud mouth at family dinners. Seung-jun received the request, escort a client to a society wedding, presents only, no further commitment required, and was about to decline. He declined everything social. He had neither the patience nor the interest. And then his assistant mentioned the name of the groom. Kang Min-ho. Seung-jun leaned back in his chair. Kang Min-ho, whose father had been attempting for 6 months to renegotiate the terms of a loan that Seung-jun had zero intention of renegotiating. Kang Min-ho, who had been quietly trying to build alliances that would reduce Seung-jun's leverage over the family. Attending the wedding of a man he was about to financially dismantle had a certain poetry to it. "Confirm it," he told his assistant. He did not ask what the woman looked like. It was not relevant. They met in the lobby of the Seung Tower the morning before the wedding. A brief introduction, purely logistical, Amara had said. Kadisa arrived in a rust-orange wrap dress that moved when she walked. She was not trying to impress anyone in this building. She wore her natural hair pinned back, simple gold hoops, and the particular expression of a woman who had already decided she would not be intimidated. She stepped off the elevator and looked across the marble lobby. He was already there. Han Seung-jun in a charcoal suit, standing with the stillness of someone who had never once been nervous in his life. Broad-shouldered, sharp-jawed, the kind of face that looked like it had been designed to make decisions that changed lives. He was talking to his assistant, not looking up yet, and Kadisa had exactly 3 seconds to observe him before his eyes lifted. They found her immediately. Dark eyes, unreadable, and then something shifted, so briefly she almost missed it, a flicker, like a man who had walked into a room expecting ordinary and found something else entirely. He crossed the lobby. His assistant melted away. "Kadisa Osa." His voice was low, precise, not a question. "Han Seung-jun." She kept her chin level. "Thank you for agreeing to this." "I had my own reasons." He studied her face with an attention that felt less like assessment and more like memorization. "You are not what I expected." She raised an eyebrow. "Is that good or bad?" The corner of his mouth moved, almost a smile, not quite. "I have not decided." It was the most honest thing anyone had said to her in months, and she hated how much she liked it. They shook hands. His grip was firm and warm, and he held on 1 beat longer than necessary. She noticed. He noticed that she noticed. Neither of them said anything about it. "Tomorrow, 7 p.m., he said. "My driver will collect you." He walked back toward the elevator without waiting for her to respond. Kadisa stood in the lobby of the most powerful building in the city and thought, "This is either the smartest thing I've ever done or the most dangerous." She suspected both. The next evening arrived wrapped in gold light and the particular electricity of a room full of people performing wealth for each other. Maison Blanc was exactly as intimidating as Kadisa remembered from the one time she'd attended an event there as Minho's fiancé. White marble floors, cascading floral installations, a string quartet playing somewhere behind the champagne. She had come here before on his arm, and he had spent the evening steering her away from cameras. Tonight, she arrived differently. The car door opened, and Han Seung-jun stepped out first, then offered his hand. She took it, stepped out in a deep burgundy gown, full-skirted, sweetheart neckline, gold embroidery at the bodice, her hair falling in soft twists around her shoulders. The earrings were long and gold, and they caught the light. She heard the shift in the atmosphere before she saw anything. The way conversations paused, the way heads turned, the way a photographer near the entrance instinctively raised his camera. Seung-jun's hand moved to the small of her back, light, deliberate, unmistakable. "This is my company. Act accordingly." She did not need the instruction, but the warmth of his hand steadied her in a way she had not anticipated, and she filed that feeling away to examine later. They moved through the entrance together, and she felt the precise moment the room registered who he was. Han Seung-jun did not attend weddings. Han Seung-jun did not attend anything. The whispers started like a small fire and spread fast. She found Minho with her eyes before he found her. He was standing near the altar setup, laughing with groomsmen, looking exactly as polished and hollow as she remembered. Dark suit, perfect hair, the easy confidence of a man who had never once questioned whether he deserved to take up space. He turned, scanned the room the way people do when they are expecting to enjoy a reaction. He found her. The laugh died. His eyes traveled first her face, which had not changed except to become more certain, then the gown, which left no apology for her figure, then the man beside her, And that was when Kang Min-ho's expression did something extraordinary. It went completely blank. Kadisa held his gaze for exactly 3 seconds. She did not smile. She did not flinch. She simply looked at him, the way you look at something that once had power over you and no longer does, and then she turned to accept a glass of champagne from a passing server. "He's seen you," Seungjun said quietly, very close to her ear. "I know." She sipped the champagne. Her hand was completely steady. "He looks pale." "He should." There was something in his voice, quiet, edged, that she could not fully interpret. "You are the most striking woman in this room." She turned to look at him. He was not looking at her. He was watching Min-ho with the particular expression of a man calculating something. "You don't have to say things like that," she said. Now he looked at her. "I don't say things I don't mean." The string quartet shifted into something slow and aching. Kadisa looked away first. Her heart was doing something inconvenient, and she had come here for one reason only. She would not complicate the evening by developing feelings for her escort. She absolutely would not. The ceremony was beautiful in the way that hollow things often are, expertly decorated, perfectly lit, utterly empty at the center. Kadisa sat in the 5th row. Seungjun sat beside her, his arm resting along the back of her chair without touching her, close enough that she was acutely aware of the warmth of him. Min-ho stood at the altar and could not stop glancing back. She watched him marry someone else with the clean, clear eyes of a woman who had processed her grief in private and had nothing left to perform. The bride was beautiful. Tall, thin, the kind of girl Min-ho's mother had always wanted. Kadisa felt nothing except a distant, tired relief that she had not spent 3 more years trying to become someone's acceptable version of herself. What she did not expect was the moment the officiant said, "Speak now or forever hold your peace," and the entire room went so quiet that she could hear her own heartbeat and feel Seungjun's hand find hers in the silence. Not possessively, not dramatically, just his fingers settling over hers on her lap, warm and certain, as if to say, "I see what this costs you." She did not pull away. She looked at their hands and thought, "This man is a stranger." She also thought, "Why does this feel like recognition?" The reception was where things unraveled, as receptions tend to do. Min-ho found her during the cocktail hour. She had been expecting it. He appeared at her elbow when Seungjun had stepped away briefly to take a call, and Min-ho's first words were spoken with a smile that did not reach his eyes. "You look," he paused, the old habit of a slight built into the pause, "different." "I look like myself," Kadisa said pleasantly, "which you always had trouble with." His jaw tightened. "Why did you bring him? Why did you invite me to your wedding, Min-ho?" The silence between them was one of the most honest moments they'd had in 3 years. "I wanted you to see." "What you upgraded to?" She tilted her head. "I saw, congratulations, she seems lovely." She picked up a canapé from a passing tray with perfect composure. "Now if you'll excuse me." She turned away, and that was when she heard Min-ho say behind her, low, for her ears only, the old cruelty surfacing, "You always did eat too much at events." The words landed like a slap, old, familiar. She felt them in the stomach, which was exactly where he'd always aimed. She was about to reply. She had a response ready. She had practiced, but she did not need it. Because Han Seungjun was already there. She had not heard him return, but he stood at her shoulder now, and the look he directed at Kang Min-ho was the quietest, most terrifying expression she had ever seen on a human face. "Kang Min-ho," his voice was almost gentle. "I've been looking for an opportunity to speak with you. Shall we discuss the restructuring terms your father's office has been avoiding?" Min-ho went gray. "Or," Seungjun continued, his tone not changing at all, "you could apologize to Ms. Osai and remove yourself from this conversation." The silence stretched. Min-ho looked at Kadisa. The cruelty in his face was gone. What replaced it was something smaller and less forgivable, embarrassment. "I apologize," he said stiffly, and left. Kadisa stared at the space where he'd been. Then she turned to Seungjun, and the look on his face was something else now, the controlled fury of it, the way he was still watching Minho's retreating back with those dark, unhurried eyes. "You didn't have to do that," she said softly. "I know." He looked at her. Something moved through his expression. "I wanted to." The car ride back was quiet in the way that full things are quiet, not empty, but weighted with everything unsaid. She sat on her side of the back seat. He sat on his. The city moved past the windows in streaks of gold and neon, and Kadisa thought about Minho's face and Seunjun's hand over hers, and the way this evening had not gone at all the way she'd planned. She'd planned to feel victorious, untouchable, the ex who came back beautiful and unbothered. She had not planned to feel accompanied, seen, protected by someone who owed her nothing and had chosen to protect her anyway. "Can I ask you something?" she said. He turned his head. "Why did you really agree to this?" The pause was brief, considered. "The Kang family owes me a significant sum and has been acting in bad faith for months. Attending tonight had strategic value. That's the real reason." He held her gaze. The city lights moved across his face. "It was the reason I told my assistant." "And the other reason?" Another pause, longer this time. "I was curious," he said finally, "about a woman who could be invited to her ex-fiancé's wedding as an act of cruelty and respond by walking through the door like she owned the building." Kadisa felt something warm and unwelcome move through her chest. "Amara told you." "She told my assistant. My assistant told me." His eyes stayed steady on hers. "I was curious about your courage." "And now?" The car slowed in front of her building. The door was about to open, and Han Seunjun said, very quietly, "Now I'm curious about everything else." She told herself she would not think about him. She thought about him every hour for the next 3 days. It was inconvenient and embarrassing, and she managed it by throwing herself into work, a product launch for a Lagos-based fashion brand, a charity gala she was coordinating in the city, 3 client calls back to back. She was busy. She was professional. She was absolutely not replaying the exact tone of his voice when he said, "I'm curious about everything else." On Thursday morning, a package arrived at her office. No note, her name on the outside in precise, unhurried handwriting. Inside, a copy of a food journal she had casually mentioned loving during the car ride. She'd said something about tracking recipes from her grandmother's village, and a single card with a phone number. "If you'd like to have dinner, HSJ." Her assistant hovered in the doorway. "Who sent that?" Kadisa looked at the card. "Trouble," she said. She typed the number into her phone before she'd fully decided to, which told her everything she needed to know about where she was headed. He took her to a private dining room on the top floor of the Seung Tower. Not a restaurant, but a room that felt like being inside a secret, with low lighting and a table for 2 set near floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over the whole breathing city. She had worn a forest green dress. He had worn dark slacks and a black shirt, the formality of his usual armor slightly loosened. No jacket, 2 buttons undone at the collar, a version of him that felt, somehow, more exposed. They talked for 4 hours. She had expected power plays, small tests, the kind of conversation rich, dangerous men had when they were deciding if you were worth their time. What she got instead was a man who listened, who asked questions and then sat completely still for the answer, as if nothing else in the world existed, who made her laugh twice, which startled her, because nothing about him suggested humor, and yet he was dry and precise, and the second laugh caught her off guard so completely that she covered her mouth, and he watched her with an expression she couldn't name. "You hide it," he said, when the laughter faded. "Hide what?" "How much you feel." He turned his wine glass slowly. "You show competence and composure, but when something catches you, really catches you, your whole face changes." She felt suddenly, uncomfortably seen. Most people prefer the composure. Most people, he agreed, are not paying attention. The city glittered below them. The silence between them was the kind you wanted to live inside. She was in serious trouble. Over the next week and a half, he found reasons to be near her. He sent coffee to her office, the exact blend she'd mentioned preferring, dark and strong with no sugar. He appeared at the venue walkthrough for her charity gala, claiming he'd heard the event from a mutual contact and had questions about sponsorship, which was transparent, and she knew it and so did he, but neither of them said so. He stood beside her in the empty ballroom while she gestured at tables and staging, and he listened with the focused intensity he brought to everything. And at one point, their hands brushed over a seating chart and neither of them moved away. She told Amara on Friday night, over wine, that nothing was happening. Amara looked at her face and said, "Kadisa, he's a CEO of several conglomerates and possibly connected to things I don't want to know about. Kadisa, and he's Korean and I'm Ghanaian, and we have completely different worlds. Kadisa, what? You are describing the man you are falling for and calling it a warning." Kadisa drank her wine and said nothing, because Amara was not wrong, and admitting that out loud would make it real. The night of the charity gala, Kadisa was everywhere at once, headset in, clipboard in hand, the invisible engine that made beautiful rooms happen. She wore black tonight because she was working, not attending, and she moved through the crowd with the particular speed of someone who could solve 3 problems without breaking stride. She did not expect Seungjun to be there as a guest. She especially did not expect him to spend the first hour of the evening watching her work, with an expression that her server caught on his way past and whispered to a colleague was the way you look at something you're trying not to want. What she also did not expect was David. David was a business contact, a charming, persistent contact who had been orbiting her professional life for months and had recently shifted his orbit toward personal. He found her near the bar during a 10-minute gap in her coordination duties, brought her water she hadn't asked for but needed, made her laugh with a story about a disastrous conference in Dubai, and stood just slightly too close in the way that was not quite crossing a line, but was definitely looking at the line with interest. She did not notice, across the room, the way Han Seungjun went very still. She did not notice the way he set down his champagne. She did not notice the way he moved, not fast, not dramatic, but with the absolute certainty of a man who had decided something, through the crowd toward her. She noticed when he arrived at her side. "Ms. Osai." His voice was even, perfectly controlled. His hand went to the small of her back, that same warm, deliberate placement as the wedding, and he looked at David with the particular expression of a man who had already run a background check and found something mildly unacceptable. David blinked, registered who this was, took a small, instinctive step back. "Seungjun," Kadisa kept her voice neutral. "I didn't know you were attending. I RSVP'd this morning." He did not look at her. He was still looking at David. "Am I interrupting?" "Not at all," David said, with the specific brightness of someone making a strategic retreat. "Great event, Kadisa. I'll find you later." He melted into the crowd. Kadisa counted to 3. "You ran him off," she said. "I said hello." His hand was still on her back. "He left of his own accord." "You looked at him like a tax audit." The corner of his mouth moved. "Did I?" She turned to face him fully, which meant stepping back from his hand, which she did deliberately. "You don't need to do that. We are not, this is not." She searched for the right word. "I know what this is," he said quietly. And the way he said it, not defensive, not dismissive, just certain, stopped every word she'd been preparing. He looked at her for a long moment. Something moved behind his eyes, something that he did not usually let surface. "I know what this is," he said again, softer. "The question is whether you do." Her headset crackled. The caterer was having a crisis in the kitchen. She broke eye contact, pressed the headset, and went back to work. But she felt his gaze on her back for the rest of the evening. The rumors reached Kadisa on a Monday, the way all dangerous things arrive, quietly, through a back door, dressed as concern. It was her client, Mrs. Park, a socialite with kind eyes and a sharp network, who leaned across a lunch table and said, "I heard you've been seen with Han Seungjun." "A few times," Kadisa said carefully. Mrs. Park set down her fork. He is not a man women spend time with casually, dear. His last relationship, she paused, choosing words. The woman left the country. There were people who said she was encouraged to leave by people who work for him. Kadisa kept her expression neutral. That sounds like a rumor. Most truths start that way. Mrs. Park patted her hand gently. He is powerful in ways that are not entirely visible. The Seung group is only the surface. The men who come to his office at midnight are not filing annual reports. That evening, Kadisa sat in her apartment with the lights low and her tea going cold, and thought about everything she knew and everything she didn't. She thought about his hand over hers in the church. She thought about the food journal and the precise handwriting. She thought about the way he listened, the complete, unhurried stillness of him, as if she were the most important document he had ever read. And she thought about a woman who had left the country. She called him. He answered on the second ring, which surprised her. She had imagined assistance and barriers and waiting. Kadisa. Just her name, in that low, precise voice, and her whole chest tightened. I need to ask you something, she said, and I need you to tell me the truth. A pause. All right. Are you dangerous? The silence stretched long enough that she heard him breathe. That depends, he said finally, on who is asking and what they're standing near. I'm asking, and I'm standing near you, apparently. Yes, another pause, and this one felt weighted with something she couldn't name. I am dangerous to people who threaten what matters to me, to people who try to take what isn't theirs. His voice dropped, careful and deliberate. Not to you, never to you. How can I know that? You can't. He said it with no defensiveness, no deflection, just truth, clean and plain. Not yet. You'd have to decide whether you trust the evidence you've gathered so far. Kadisa pressed her free hand to her sternum, where something was pulling in a direction she hadn't chosen. The woman, she said, the one who left the country. The pause this time was different, heavier. Her name was Soo Jin. She was my girlfriend for 8 months. She was also passing my private financial documents to a rival group. His voice did not harden. If anything, it quieted. I did not hurt her. I gave her a choice between prosecution and relocation. She chose to leave. A beat. I did not stop her. Kadisa closed her eyes, processed, felt the shape of the truth in it, not comfortable, not simple, but coherent. Okay, she said. Okay. I'm not saying I'm not still concerned. I'm saying I heard you. That's enough for now, he said, and then softer. Go to sleep, Kadisa. You have the Ibarra group walkthrough at 8. She blinked. How do you know my schedule? A pause that might have contained the ghost of a smile. Good night. He hung up. She sat with her cold tea and her complicated feelings and thought, I am so far gone already. 3 days later, the world shifted on its axis. Kadisa was leaving her office at 9 p.m., later than usual. A contract revision had run long, when she became aware of 2 things in quick succession. The parking structure was emptier than it should have been, and the 2 men near her car were not building security. She knew this because building security did not wear the particular expression of men who had been given a task and a deadline. She turned to go back inside. The stairwell door she'd come through had already clicked locked behind her. Ms. Osai, the taller one spoke, accented Korean. We'd like you to come with us. Mr. Kang sends his regards. Kang, Minho's family, the ones who owed Seung-jun money and had been running out of options. I'm not going anywhere with you, she said, and was proud of how steady her voice was. That wasn't really a request. She had her phone in her hand, and she hit Seung-jun's contact before the taller man reached her. She didn't get the call to connect. She got as far as opening the message thread and sending the parking structure floor number before the phone was taken. What happened next happened fast, a hand on her arm. Her own sharp resistance, the sound of a scuffle, and then headlights. Bright, sudden, flooding the structure. 3 cars, black, moving with the coordinated silence of something rehearsed. Doors opened. 6 men stepped out, and the two who had been holding Kadisa's arms released her with the specific urgency of people reassessing their life choices. Han Seung-jun stepped out of the middle car. He was not in his usual suit. He was in dark tactical clothing, and his face was the calmest, most terrifying thing she had ever seen, the composed surface over something volcanic, barely contained, dangerous in its stillness. He walked toward her first. His eyes moved over her, checking, cataloging, and his hands came up to cup her face, tilting it to the light. "Are you hurt?" Low, very controlled. "No." She gripped his wrists because her legs had decided to start shaking now that the immediate danger had passed. "I'm not hurt." He held her face for one more moment. Then he turned. What he said to the two men, in Korean, clipped and quiet, she did not need to translate. The effect was immediate and total. They did not run. Running would have been pointless. They simply stood and waited with the resignation of men who understood the nature of their situation. Seung-jun looked back at her. "My driver will take you home. I'll be there within the hour." "Seung-jun." "Please." The word came out with something in it she had not heard from him before. Not commanding, not controlled, just please, raw at the edges. "Let me finish this and come to you, please." She nodded. He arrived at her apartment 53 minutes later. She had changed into soft clothes and made tea she didn't drink and sat on her couch trying to stop replaying the parking structure in her head. She let him in when he knocked, and he stood in her doorway for a moment just looking at her, as if confirming again with his own eyes that she was whole and present and real. Then he came inside and sat on her couch, not beside her but close, and leaned forward with his elbows on his knees and his hands loosely clasped, staring at the floor. "This was my fault," he said. "It was the Kang family's fault. They targeted you to get to me." His jaw tightened. "That makes it mine." "Seung-jun," she turned toward him, "look at me." He looked up, and the thing she saw in his face, the raw, unguarded weight of it, made her breath catch. This was not the man who moved rooms. This was not the composed surface that made financial opponents sweat. This was a man who had driven to a parking structure at 9 p.m. with 6 cars because a single floor number from her phone had broken something open in him. "I'm okay," she said softly. "I'm right here." He looked at her for a long moment. Then, with the deliberateness of a man who was choosing something, he reached out and took her hand, turned it over, pressed his thumb gently to the inside of her wrist, where her pulse was still running a little fast. He held it there, like a promise, like an anchor. "I should not have let you get close," he said quietly. "I knew what being near me costs. I'm an adult. I make my own calculations. You shouldn't have to calculate danger just to be near someone." "Seung-jun," she tightened her fingers around his. "Stop trying to push me away using concern as the excuse." The silence between them became something different, something that had a texture and a warmth and a pull. "I'm not good at this," he said. He stopped. "Vulnerable," she offered. "Careful with something that matters." His voice had dropped to barely above a whisper. "I know how to protect empires. I don't know how to protect." He looked at their joined hands. "This," she finished. He lifted his eyes to hers. "Yes," he said, "this." The lamp in the corner made the room amber and soft. Outside, the city breathed. And Kadisa thought about every wall she had built since Minho, careful, necessary, protective walls, and felt them strain against the pull of this man who made her want to dismantle them herself. She leaned forward and rested her forehead against his shoulder. He went very still. Then his free arm came around her, slow and certain, and he held her the way you hold something you are terrified of losing. They stayed like that for a long time. No words, just warmth and the sound of breathing and the city outside the window. It was the most intimate thing either of them had allowed in years. Fade. She woke early, before the light fully committed to the day. He was asleep in the armchair across from her couch. He had not left, but he had not assumed either, had simply stayed nearby, keeping watch. And in the quiet gray of early morning, she looked at him and felt the full force of what she was feeling. And then she panicked. Because this was too much, too fast, too real. She had been here before, not here, not with someone like him, but in the territory of feeling large and unguarded and certain, and she knew how it ended. She knew what it felt like when the person you'd opened yourself to decided you were more than they wanted to manage. Minho's voice surfaced in her memory, unbidden and cruel. You are too much. What if she was? What if Seung-jun, in daylight, away from the adrenaline of last night, looked at her and reached the same conclusion? She did what she always did with feelings that frightened her. She moved quietly. She gathered her things. She wrote a note, "Thank you for last night. I'm fine. I think we should leave it here," and she left it on the coffee table. And she left before he woke up. He found the note at 6:43 a.m. He read it once. Then he sat very still for a moment in the particular way that meant he was deciding something. Then he called his assistant. Find her. She was at her office by 8, headphones in, manuscript draft open, functioning on the adrenaline of avoidance. She was fine. She was professional. She had made a sensible decision to step back before she ended up somewhere she couldn't return from. She was on her second client call when her office door opened. She had a keypad entry. There were exactly 4 people with the code. Han Seung-jun was not one of them. She pulled one headphone out. He stood in the doorway in a suit, back in his armor, but his expression was not armored at all. He looked at her with the focused intensity of a man who had driven across the city on insufficient sleep to say something he had apparently decided could not wait. She held up one finger, one moment, and finished her call with practiced professionalism, which she was proud of considering her heart was currently attempting to exit her chest. She set down the phone. How did you get the code? Amara. I'm going to kill her. She loves you, he said. She was concerned. He stepped inside and closed the door. The space between them was a desk and about 6 feet of charged air. You left. I wrote a note. You wrote a goodbye disguised as gratitude. He crossed to her desk. Not aggressive, just present, immovable. Look at me, Kadisa. She looked at him. What are you afraid of? His voice was quiet. I'm not. Tell me the truth. She pressed her hands flat on the desk. I'm afraid of being exactly what I am and watching it not be enough. Again. The words came out smaller than she intended, more honest. I'm afraid you'll decide I'm too much or too complicated or... Stop. He said it gently but absolutely. He moved around the desk, stopped in front of her, close enough that she had to tilt her chin up to hold his gaze. That man, what he said to you, what he made you believe about yourself, I need you to hear me. He was wrong. He was catastrophically, unforgivably wrong. And the fact that his voice is still in your head making you run from something real, his jaw tightened. I can't fix what he did, but I can tell you what I see. Seung-jun. A woman who walked into a room designed to diminish her and made it smaller instead. His voice had dropped low, close, certain. A woman who is warm and sharp and braver than she gives herself credit for, and he stopped, breathed. A woman I have been thinking about since the moment she walked across my lobby in an orange dress like she was entirely unimpressed with everything I'd built. Kadisa felt her eyes sting. She blinked it back hard. You are not too much, he said. You are exactly, precisely right. The silence that followed was the loudest thing she'd ever heard. She looked up at him, this powerful, guarded, impossible man who had driven across the city to say something true, and felt the last wall come down. I'm scared, she whispered. I know. He reached up and brushed his thumb across her cheek. So am I haven't been. He stopped, tried again. I haven't let anything matter in a long time. You matter. That terrifies me considerably more than anything that happened last night. She laughed. It came out a little wet. You're comparing me to a kidnapping attempt. You're more alarming, he said, completely serious. She laughed again, and this time he smiled, really smiled, the rare full version she hadn't seen yet, and it did something irreversible to her. She leaned forward and closed the last of the space between them. The moment was quiet and warm and entirely private. When they finally broke apart, his forehead came to rest against hers, and they stayed there breathing the same air, and the city moved on outside like none of this had happened. Like everything hadn't just changed. Seungjun moved on the Kang family the following week. He did not move with anger. He moved with the cold precision of someone who had been patient and was no longer. The loan terms were called in. The political connections the Kang family had been cultivating, connections built on borrowed time and borrowed money, dissolved when it became clear who they had borrowed from and what the terms actually were. Minho's father made 2 attempts to reach Seungjun directly. Both calls were received by the legal team. On the 3rd day, Minho himself appeared at the Seung Tower lobby. He was escorted to a meeting room and left to wait for 40 minutes, which was itself a message. When Seungjun finally entered, he sat across from Minho and placed a single document on the table. Full repayment schedule, no extensions, the original penalty clauses apply. He folded his hands. Or you can explore the alternative terms which are less favorable. Minho looked at the document, then up at the man across from him. He was many things, prideful, petty, small in the ways that comfortable men become small, but he was not stupid enough to misread this room. "This is about her," he said. Seungjun looked at him with an expression of complete neutrality. "This is about a loan agreement your family has been dishonoring for 14 months. Ms. Osai is not a business matter." A pause, precise and pointed. "She is, however, someone I would encourage you never to address again." Minho signed the document. He left without another word. The weeks that followed were not without difficulty. Kadisa's world and Seungjun's world were not simple to navigate together. His world had security details and shadow networks, and the particular loneliness of a man who had spent years making himself untouchable. Her world had client crises and late nights, and the vulnerability of someone who had rebuilt herself from scratch and was terrified of being unbuilt again. They argued once, a sharp, real argument about the security detail he'd quietly assigned to her building without telling her, which she discovered and found equal parts touching and infuriating. "I can make my own decisions about my safety," she said. "You can, and I can make decisions about mine." His voice was even. "Losing you would be a threat to my safety." She stared at him. "That is such a manipulative thing to say." "It's true. It's still manipulative." "I know," he held her gaze. "I'm sorry I didn't tell you, I should have asked." The apology direct, no hedging, no self-justification, stopped her cold. She had not expected it. He had the kind of power that bred men who didn't apologize, who reframed instead, deflected, defended. "He just said I should have asked, and meant it." "Fine," she said, "but the details stays on the street, not in the lobby." "Agreed. And you tell me, when you make decisions that affect my life." "Agreed." She pointed at him. "I mean it." "I know you do." He reached out and caught her pointing finger, curled his hand around it gently. "That's one of the things." "One of the things what?" "One of the things He stopped, looked at her. The word was right there, visible in his eyes, and he said it quietly, with the particular care of someone handling something breakable. "Love." The air in the room changed. Kadisa felt it everywhere. "Seungjun," she said softly. "I know it's fast." He turned her hand over in both of his. "I know there are complications. I know you have reasons to be careful. I'm not asking you to." "I love you too," she said. He stopped, looked at her. Something in his face broke open, not dramatically, not the way it happens in stories with orchestras, just quietly, like a man who had not known how much he'd been braced for a different answer. "Oh," he said. She laughed. "That's your response." "I'm recalibrating." His grip on her hand tightened. Then he pulled her close and she came willingly, and his arms came around her completely, protective, certain, present. "I love you," he said again, into her hair, like he wanted the practice, like he planned on saying it many more times and wanted to make sure he was doing it right. "You're doing fine," she told him. He laughed. She felt it move through his chest. "Good," he said. 2 months later, at an industry gala, the kind attended by everyone who mattered in the city's business and social worlds, Seung-jun did something no one expected. He arrived with Kadisa on his arm. This was not new. They had been seen together. The city had been watching and speculating with the enthusiasm that always accompanied a man like him finally being attached to someone. What was new was what happened at the podium. He had been invited to speak brief, pro forma, the obligatory remarks of a primary sponsor. He gave them, and then at the end he looked out at the room and said, "I was told recently that I was not capable of gratitude, that I experience the world as transactions." A pause. "The woman who taught me I was wrong is here tonight. She knows who she is." He looked directly at Kadisa in the third row, who was now very carefully not reacting in front of 300 people. "I intend to spend a considerable amount of time proving she was right to believe otherwise." The room erupted. Kadisa pressed her hand over her mouth and thought about orange dresses and lobby crossings and parking structures, and a man asleep in her armchair, and felt the full, terrifying, beautiful weight of what her life had become. Amara, seated beside her, was already crying. "I told you," Amara whispered fiercely. "I told you." He asked her 3 weeks later. Not at a gala, not at a restaurant, not with an audience. He asked her in her kitchen on a Sunday morning, when she was making eggs and he was reading documents at her counter, and the apartment was full of light and the particular comfort of two people who had learned each other's rhythms. He had a habit of showing up on Sunday mornings now. She had stopped pretending she didn't leave the door unlocked for him. She turned from the stove, and he was standing a few feet away with a small box in his hand, and the expression of a man who was completely certain and completely terrified in equal measure. "I practiced this," he said. "I had a full version, structured points." She looked at the box. Her heart was somewhere in her throat. "What happened to the structured points?" "You," he said simply. "You happened to everything I planned." She set down the spatula. "Kadisa," he opened the box. Inside was a ring not ostentatious, not trying to speak for itself. Simple and perfect and clearly chosen for her specifically, not for a category of woman. "I am not an easy man, I know this. I come with complexity and history and a particular kind of world that I will spend every day working to make safe enough for you." He held her gaze. "But I will spend every day. I will show up. I will listen. I will choose you, loudly, privately, publicly, in every room for as long as you allow it." He paused. "Will you?" She crossed the kitchen, took his face in her hands. "Yes," she said. "Obviously, yes." He slid the ring onto her finger with hands that were, for the first time in her experience of him, not entirely steady. She noticed. She loved him for it. He kissed her like a promise, quiet, certain, permanent. The eggs burned. Neither of them noticed. The wedding was small. This surprised everyone who knew him. They had all expected the Seung group wedding, the event of the decade, the production. What they got instead was 40 people in a garden, late afternoon gold light, no cameras except the ones their guests carried. Kadisa wore ivory with gold embroidery at the hem, a dress that moved when she walked and made no apologies for any of her. Her hair was loose. Her earrings were the long gold ones from the night they met. Seung-jun stood at the end of the path and watched her come toward him with the expression of a man who had decided, entirely and permanently, on something. When she reached him, he leaned close and said very quietly, "Orange dress, marble lobby, completely unimpressed." She laughed, surprised out of her composure like always. He smiled the full version. The efficient cleared her throat. 5 months into their marriage, on a Tuesday evening. Kadisa stood in their bathroom with a small white test in her hand and felt the world tilt slowly and permanently on its axis. She found him in his study, reviewing something that immediately became irrelevant. She handed him the test. He looked at it, then at her, then back at the test. The controlled composure of Han Seung-jun, the man who ran boardrooms and dismantled empires and faced danger with the stillness of still water, cracked open completely. He stood, crossed to her in 2 steps, put both hands on her face. His eyes were bright in a way she had never seen. Kadisa, he said, just that. I know, she said. He pulled her in, held her with every ounce of the protection and devotion and careful, enormous love he had been storing up for years before she walked across a marble lobby and woke it all up. Outside, the city moved on. Inside, something new and permanent took root. He had invited his chubby ex-fiancée to his wedding to shame her. She had arrived with a Mafia CEO. And in the space between cruelty and courage, between an orange dress and a marble lobby, between a parking structure and a Sunday morning kitchen, love, as it always does one,